The massive doors of Terran Colonial Academy Station 7 slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing the sprawling cafeteria beyond. 17-year-old Kiranel hesitated at the threshold, her 4 slender arms clutching a meal tray while her iridescent violet carapace caught the overhead lights. The Veldari were insectoid in appearance, tall, graceful, with compound eyes that shimmered like opals and delicate antennae that twitched with every emotion. The cafeteria fell silent as she entered. Kiranel was the first and only Veldari student ever admitted to this prestigious human boarding school. 20 years ago, humanity had made first contact with her people through a tragic misunderstanding, a conflict that had devastated the Veldari homeworld and left deep scars on both civilizations. She was here as part of a peace initiative, a symbol of reconciliation. But to the students staring at her now, she was just a bug. She spotted an empty seat at a table near the windows and approached, her movements fluid despite her alien physiology. Before she could set down her tray, a tall boy with sandy hair stood up, his face twisted in disgust. "You can't sit here, scum," Tyler Morrison sneered, his voice loud enough to carry across the room. He was the son of a decorated admiral, and his contempt was matched by the sneers of his friends. "Bug freaks aren't welcome at this table." Kiranel's antennae drooped, a gesture of sadness that none of the humans recognized or cared to understand. She looked around the cafeteria hoping someone might speak up, might tell Tyler he was wrong. But every face turned away. Some looked uncomfortable, others amused, but none intervened. "Find somewhere else," Tyler added, waving her away like an insect. His friends laughed. Across the cafeteria, Vice Principal Lisa Harper watched from her observation post, her jaw tight with anger. She'd fought hard to bring Kiranel here, believing the academy could be better than the prejudices of the past. But she couldn't force acceptance. That had to come from within. Kiranel finally found an empty table in the corner, as far from the other students as possible. She sat alone, her meal untouched, her compound eyes reflecting 100 fragmented images of a room that had rejected her. That night, in her small quarters, Kiranel composed a message home on her handheld device. Her 4 fingers moved in practiced coordination across the holographic keyboard. "Mother, Father, the humans are not ready to see us as equals. But I will endure. For our people. For the future we're trying to build. I will not give them a reason to hate us more." She sent the message into the void of space and curled up on her bunk, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake coming here. 3 weeks passed and the harassment only intensified. In the corridors between classes, students would accidentally slam doors on Kiranel's limbs. She'd learned to keep her 4 arms close to her body, but even that couldn't prevent all the collisions. In the locker room after physical training, someone had scrawled "Bug Go Home" across her storage unit in permanent marker. The maintenance staff cleaned it, but by the next day new slurs appeared. Tyler Morrison led the campaign of torment with enthusiasm. His friend, Jake Patterson, filmed most of their encounters, posting them to social media with mocking captions. "Watch the alien freak try to use human equipment," one video proclaimed, showing Kiranel struggling with a tablet designed for 2 hands instead of 4. The rumors were perhaps worse than the direct confrontations. "I heard Veldari secrete acid when they're angry," whispered Emma Collins in the hallway, loud enough for Kiranel to hear. "My dad said they're just here to spy on us," added Brett Richardson. Preparing for another war. Even some of the teachers seemed uncomfortable with her presence. During combat training, a mandatory class for all academy students, Instructor Davis paired Kiranel with the most aggressive opponents, claiming it would toughen her up for the real world. She took her bruises in silence, her healing factor working overtime to repair the damage. Despite everything, Kiranel excelled academically. Her 4-armed coordination made her brilliant at multitasking in the engineering labs. While human students struggled to monitor 3 different systems simultaneously, Kiranel could operate 4 with ease. Her compound eyes could detect radiation wavelengths in the ultraviolet and infrared spectrums that humans couldn't see without instruments, making her invaluable during advanced physics experiments. In quantum mechanics class, Professor Williams presented a problem that had stumped the department for months, a complex equation involving dimensional folding that seemed unsolvable. Kiranel solved it in 20 minutes, her 4 hands writing calculations across 3 different tablets simultaneously while her mind processed the mathematics at a speed that left her classmates stunned. "Impossible," Professor Williams breathed, checking her work. This is correct. The achievement should have earned respect. Instead, it bred resentment. "Of course the bug can do math," Tyler muttered in the back of the classroom. "Insects are all about following patterns, right? Doesn't make her smart. Just programmed. Laughter rippled through the room. Kiranel's antennae flattened against her head in humiliation. That night, unable to sleep, Kiranel worked on a personal project in her quarters. Loneliness had given her too much free time, so she built a custom scanner from spare parts and salvaged equipment. It was more sophisticated than anything in the Academy's inventory, capable of detecting exotic particles and analyzing deep space signals. She was calibrating the device when it suddenly chirped an alert. Kiranel's compound eyes widened as she studied the readings. A signal pattern, faint but unmistakable, was emanating from somewhere beyond the colony's outer marker buoys. The frequency and modulation matched something from her people's historical archives, something she'd only read about in ancient texts. A Devourer scout probe. Her hearts, all three of them, began to race. The Devourers were an ancient threat, a race of biomechanical predators that had destroyed the Veldari sister colonies millennia ago. They consumed entire worlds, harvesting matter and energy to fuel their endless expansion. According to all official records, they'd gone extinct thousands of years before humanity even reached for the stars. But this signal said otherwise. Kiranel spent the next 2 hours analyzing the data, running it through every filter and verification protocol she could devise. Each test confirmed the same terrifying conclusion. A Devourer scout probe was in this system, likely gathering intelligence for a larger force. She had to tell someone. The next morning, Kiranel requested an emergency meeting with Vice Principal Harper. She was the only administrator who'd shown Kiranel any kindness, who seemed to genuinely believe in the exchange program. Lisa, Vice Principal Harper, Kiranel corrected herself, spreading her scanner data across the desk. I've detected a signal that matches Devourer technology. Here in this system. Lisa studied the data carefully, her expression troubled. Kiranel, I want to believe you, but the Devourers have been extinct for thousands of years. Every major civilization's records confirm it. Our records say they went dormant, Kiranel insisted, her antennae quivering with urgency. Not extinct. Dormant. And this signal could be explained by natural phenomena, Lisa interrupted gently. Or equipment malfunction. I've seen your work in class. You're brilliant. But asking me to convince the principal and the Colonial Defense Force to mobilize based on what they'll call an alien student's hunch. She shook her head. I'm sorry, Kiranel. I need more proof. Kiranel left the office with her scanner clutched in her upper arms, her lower arms clenched into fists. She understood Lisa's position, but understanding didn't make it less frustrating. If the humans wouldn't act, she would have to prepare alone. Over the following week, Kiranel began scavenging components from the engineering labs, requisitioning materials under the guise of personal projects. She worked through the nights, sleeping only a few hours before dawn. Her quarters became a workshop, filled with half-assembled devices and complex schematics that would have been incomprehensible to human eyes. She was building something from her people's past, a weapon system that hadn't been used in over 2,000 years. Because if she was right about the Devourers, and every instinct in her three hearts screamed that she was, then everyone on this station was already dead. They just didn't know it yet. Founders' Day arrived with celebration and ceremony. The entire student body gathered in the main assembly hall, a massive space with transparent aluminum walls offering a spectacular view of the colony world below and the stars beyond. Principal Robert Mitchell stood at the podium, delivering his annual speech about humanity's expansion into the cosmos and the bright future awaiting these young pioneers. Kiranel sat in the back row as always, her scanner hidden beneath her academy jacket. The device had been chirping alerts for the past hour, each one more urgent than the last. The Devourer signals were getting stronger, closer, but she had no proof anyone would accept. She tried 3 more times to warn the administration, and each time she'd been dismissed with polite concern and suggestions to adjust to the stress of integration. She was beginning to think she might actually be wrong, that perhaps loneliness and paranoia had clouded her judgment. The alarms shattered the peaceful ceremony. Red emergency lights flooded the assembly hall as a deafening klaxon blared. Principal Mitchell stopped mid-sentence, his face draining of color as he touched his earpiece to receive an emergency transmission. This is not a drill, he announced, his voice barely steady. All students proceed to evacuation protocol Delta. Teachers initiate. The explosion cut him off. The station shuddered violently, throwing students from their seats. Through the transparent walls, 3 massive shapes decloaked against the black of space, ships unlike anything in human or Veldari design. They were organic nightmares, their hulls appearing grown rather than built, with pulsing veins of sickly green light running along their surfaces. Bone-white protrusions jutted at irregular angles, and their very presence seemed to make reality shudder. Devourer warships. Their opening salvo struck the station's main shield generators and communications array with surgical precision. Secondary explosions rippled through the hull. The lights flickered and died, replaced by emergency lighting that cast everything in shades of red. Kiranel's scanner screamed warnings, but she didn't need it anymore. She'd seen images of these ships in her people's archives, had studied them during mandatory history lessons about the worst disasters in Veldari civilization. The Devourers had returned, and they'd chosen this isolated station as their first target. Chaos erupted in the assembly hall. Students screamed and ran for the exits, trampling each other in their panic. Teachers tried to maintain order, shouting instructions that were lost in the noise. Another impact rocked the station and part of the ceiling collapsed, crushing several empty chairs. Vice Principal Harper's voice cut through the pandemonium, amplified by emergency speakers. All personnel evacuate to the reinforced core. Section 4 is compromised. Avoid the eastern corridors. Kiranel moved against the crowd, her forearms allowing her to navigate through the panicked humans with fluid efficiency. She had to reach Engineering Bay 7. Her weapon wasn't finished, but it might be their only chance. She was halfway there when she heard the screaming from Corridor 12B. Kiranel skidded to a halt, her compound eyes analyzing the situation instantly. A support beam had collapsed, blocking the main evacuation route. On the wrong side of the debris were 5 students, including Tyler Morrison and his friends Jake, Emma, Brett, and a girl named Ashley Cooper. They were trapped, and the corridor beyond them was venting atmosphere through a hull breach. Tyler saw her and his face twisted with desperate hope and residual hatred. But girl, you're good with engineering, right? Get us out of here. Kiranel's first instinct was to leave them. These were the students who'd tormented her, who'd made every day a living hell, who'd called her scum and treated her like vermin. They deserved whatever fate awaited them. But that thought lasted only a second. Follow me, she said, her translator rendering her clicking speech into English. And stay close. She led them away from the blocked corridor, moving through maintenance tunnels that most humans didn't even know existed. During her lonely nights exploring the station, Kiranel had mapped every access shaft, every service duct, every forgotten passage. Her compound eyes could see in the dim emergency lighting far better than human vision, and her forearms let her help the students through tight spaces that would have been impossible to navigate alone. Why are you helping us? Tyler asked as they crawled through a narrow service tunnel. His voice was small, ashamed. After everything we did to you? Kiranel paused, looking back at him with her multifaceted eyes. Because that is what we do, she said simply. My people learned long ago that cruelty breeds only more cruelty. Someone must break the cycle. They emerged into a wider corridor, and that's when they saw their first devourer. The creature phased through the wall like it wasn't there. A biomechanical horror 3 meters tall, with blade-like appendages and a sensor cluster that glowed with malevolent intelligence. It turned toward them and a sound like grinding metal filled the air. Run! Kiranel shouted. They ran. The devourer pursued, moving with terrifying speed. Its blades carved through bulkheads like paper. Kiranel grabbed a fire extinguisher with one of her arms and hurled it at the creature, buying them precious seconds as it tore through the obstacle. They reached an intersection and Kiranel made a split-second decision. Left. Go left. She slammed her fist against a wall panel, triggering an emergency bulkhead that crashed down between them and the devourer. The creature's blade pierced through the metal, but the barrier held, for now. This way, Kiranel panted, her 3 hearts pounding. Engineering Bay 7. It's not far. They reached the bay 2 minutes later. Kiranel overrode the lock with her personal codes, another benefit of sleepless nights spent learning the station systems. The doors slid open, revealing a space that had been converted into a workshop. And in the center, surrounded by cables and power conduits, was her weapon. The human stared at the device, a complex array of harmonic resonators arranged in a spherical pattern around a central core that pulsed with violet light. It looked alien, beautiful, and utterly incomprehensible to them. What is that? Emma whispered. Kiranel's antennae lifted with grim determination. The only thing that can stop them, she said. And I'm going to need your help to make it work. Outside, through the bay's windows, more Devourer boarding pods slammed into the station's hull. The Academy's security forces were fighting back, but their weapons were barely slowing the invaders down. Energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, even explosives. Nothing human technology could produce was designed to fight an enemy that could phase through solid matter and consumed energy to grow stronger. The station was falling. And everyone on it was going to die unless Kiranel's desperate gamble worked. She turned to the 5 students who'd tormented her, who now looked at her with new eyes, eyes that finally saw her as something more than a bug, more than scum. "Listen carefully," she said. "We don't have much time. This device is called a harmonic disruptor," Kiranel explained rapidly, her 4 hands moving across the console with practiced precision. "It generates a frequency that destabilizes the molecular bonds in devourer biotechnology. My people used them during the last war, thousands of years ago." Tyler stared at the complex machinery, his mind racing. "If your people had weapons that could stop these things, why didn't you tell anyone they might come back?" "I did tell someone," Kiranel said quietly, her antennae flattening. "No one believed me." The accusation hung in the air. Ashley looked away, shame coloring her face. They all remembered how they'd treated her, how they'd dismissed everything about her as alien and wrong. Another explosion rocked the station. Through the engineering bay windows, they could see a devourer ship extending tendril-like appendages, literally boring into the station's hull to extract materials and energy. "How do we make it work?" Jake asked, stepping forward. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. Kiranel pulled up a holographic schematic. "The disruptor needs to be powered simultaneously from 5 different nodes across the station. Here, 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 and here." 5 points lit up on the 3-dimensional map. Each node requires manual calibration to account for the station's current power fluctuations and structural damage. It's not automated. Someone has to be at each location, adjusting the frequency in real time while the main sequence runs. "That's spread across 3 different sections," Brett said, studying the map. "Some of those areas are already compromised." "I know." Kiranel's compound eyes reflected the holographic light. "But it's the only way. The disruptor draws power from the station's emergency fusion cores. If even one node fails to calibrate correctly, the whole system will overload and we'll lose our chance." Emma touched the hologram, tracing the path to the nearest node. "Show us what to do." For the next 10 minutes, Kiranel gave the fastest engineering tutorial of her life. She showed them how to read the calibration meters, how to adjust the harmonic frequency, how to recognize when the synchronization was locked. The students, who'd spent months mocking her alien physiology, now watched with desperate attention as her 4 hands demonstrated procedures they'd need to execute with only 2. "I can monitor all 5 nodes from here and guide you through comms," Kiranel explained. "My compound eyes can process the data faster than human vision. But there's a problem." "What kind of problem?" Tyler asked, though his expression said he already knew it was bad. Kiranel hesitated, then activated another display. It showed radiation readings that made the human's blood run cold. "Once the system activates, the nodes will emit theta radiation. Fatal to humans within minutes. Your species' cellular structure can't handle the exposure." "What about you?" Ashley asked quietly. "Veldari physiology is more resistant. Our carapaces evolved on a high-radiation world. I can withstand the exposure long enough to complete the calibration sequence." She paused. "Barely." "No." Tyler shook his head. "We're not letting you kill yourself for us. Not after." His voice broke. "There has to be another way." "There isn't." Kiranel's voice was gentle but firm. "I've run every simulation. The carrier must manually calibrate the primary node, which generates the highest radiation output. It has to be me." The station shuddered again, more violently this time. Sparks rained from damaged conduits overhead. Through the windows they could see devourer creatures moving through the corridors, their blade limbs tearing through security forces. "Then we help you reach the nodes," Jake said. "We can't do the calibration, but we can fight. We can buy you time." Kiranel looked at them, really looked at them, and saw something she'd never expected to see in human eyes when they looked at her. Respect, trust, and something like friendship. "Okay," she said. "We do this together." She distributed emergency plasma cutters and magnetic grapples from the engineering lockers. Not weapons exactly, but tools that could become weapons in desperate hands. Tyler found a welding torch. Brett grabbed a pneumatic ram. Emma armed herself with an industrial laser cutter. "The closest node is node 3 in the auxiliary power junction," Kiranel said, checking her scanner. "It's 2 sections away. The path should be clear, but—" Her scanner shrieked a warning. "Down!" she shouted. A devourer phased through the wall, its sensor cluster focusing on them with predatory interest. Jake swung his plasma cutter in a wild arc, and to everyone's surprise, the blade bit into the creature's limb. It recoiled, emitting that horrible grinding metal sound. "They're vulnerable when they're solid," Kiranel shouted, her mind racing with tactical calculations. "They have to phase to attack, but they can't phase through active energy fields." She grabbed a power cable and tore it free, sending sparking electricity across the floor. The Devourer's foot materialized as it stepped back from the energy, and Brett brought the pneumatic ram down with all his strength. The creature's limb shattered with a sound like breaking crystal. They ran. The journey through the station became a nightmare of close calls and desperate fights. Kiranel led them through service tunnels and maintenance shafts, her scanner predicting Devourer patrol patterns with eerie accuracy. When they encountered the creatures, the humans fought with improvised weapons while Kiranel used her knowledge of the station systems to create barriers and traps. At Node 3, Tyler and Jake held off 2 Devourers while Kiranel worked with blinding speed, her 4 arms manipulating controls that would have taken a human team 10 minutes to configure. She completed it in 90 seconds. "Node 3 online," she announced. 4 more to go. They fought their way to Node 4 through a corridor filled with Devourer biomass, pulsing organic matter that the creatures were using to convert the station itself into more of themselves. Emma used her laser cutter to burn a path through, gagging at the smell of burning alien flesh. Node 4 activated. Then Node 5. But Node 2 was deep in a section that had been completely overrun. As they approached, Kiranel's scanner showed 15 Devourers between them and their target. "I'll draw them off," Tyler said suddenly. "You 3 get her to the node." "Tyler, no," Ashley started. "I'm the fastest runner here," he said, and it was true. He'd been the Academy's track champion for 2 years running. "I can lead them away, loop back through the gym section, and meet you at the core." He looked at Kiranel, and in his eyes she saw genuine remorse, genuine respect. "I'm sorry," he said. "For everything. Let me do this." Before anyone could argue, he ran into the corridor, shouting and waving his welding torch. The Devourers turned toward him like a pack of predators scenting prey. He ran and they followed. Kiranel and the others reached Node 2. She worked frantically while Brett and the others guarded the entrance. Her hands flew across the controls, compensating for damaged power relays and rerouting energy through backup systems. "Node 2 online," she gasped. "One more. The primary node." That's when her scanner detected the massive energy signature approaching from outside the station. Not a boarding pod. Not a patrol ship. A Devourer capital vessel, 10 times larger than the others, its biomechanical bulk blotting out the stars. "We're out of time," Kiranel whispered. They ran for the primary node, back in Engineering Bay 7 where this had all started. The station's emergency speakers crackled with Principal Mitchell's voice. "All remaining personnel, evacuate to the core. The hull can't take much more. We're preparing to abandon." His transmission cut off in a burst of static. They burst into Engineering Bay 7 to find it crawling with Devourers. 5 of the creatures had breached the bay, attracted by the energy signature of the harmonic disruptor. They were trying to destroy it. "No!" Kiranel screamed. She dove into the fray, all 4 arms working in concert. She grabbed a damaged power conduit and whipped it like a flail, electricity arcing across the Devourer's sensors. Brett and Ashley and Emma fought beside her, their improvised weapons singing through the air. One by one the Devourers fell. But in the chaos, Jake went down, a blade limb slicing across his shoulder. Ashley dragged him to safety while Kiranel and Brett finished the last 2 creatures. Then Kiranel was at the primary node, her hands flying across the controls. The radiation meters were already climbing into the red zone, and she hadn't even activated the sequence yet. "Kiranel, your carapace," Emma shouted. Kiranel looked down and saw cracks forming in her iridescent armor, her body already beginning to break down from the ambient radiation. The primary node was damaged, leaking far more theta radiation than her simulations had predicted. She was going to die doing this. Not maybe. Certainly. Her hands didn't slow. "Get to the core," she said quietly. "All of you. Now." "We're not leaving you," Brett said. "You have to." Kiranel's antennae drooped with sad affection. Tell them we're not all bad. My people. Tell them some of us are worth knowing." Through the bay windows, the Devourer capital ship's weapon ports began to glow. Kiranel activated the final sequence. The harmonic disruptor came to life with a sound like the universe singing. Energy poured through the 5 nodes, converging on the primary core in Engineering Bay 7. The radiation levels spiked so high that the meters simply died, unable to register numbers that extreme. Kiranel's carapace cracked further, glowing lines of pain spreading across her body. Her 3 hearts hammered against her ribs. Her compound eyes began to cloud. But her hands never stopped moving, making micro-adjustments to keep the frequency locked, to compensate for the station's failing power grid, to pour everything she had into this one desperate chance. The harmonic pulse erupted from the station in a sphere of violet light. It washed over the Devourer ships like a wave, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the ships began to scream. Their organic hulls convulsed, the biomechanical systems that held them together coming apart at the molecular level. The harmonic frequency was anathema to their very existence, unraveling the bonds that made them possible. The smaller ships simply dissolved, breaking into clouds of inert particles. The capital vessel lasted longer, but even it couldn't withstand the assault. Its weapon ports went dark. Its hull cracked and split. And then it was fleeing, phasing into whatever dimension the Devourers called home, leaving behind only debris and silence. The station was saved. In Engineering Bay 7, Kiranel collapsed beside the primary node, her body smoking, her carapace shattered in a dozen places. She could barely see through her damaged eyes, could barely feel her limbs. But she was smiling. She'd done it. She'd saved them all. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Tyler Morrison stumbling into the bay, alive and whole, his face wet with tears as he ran toward her. The medical wing of Terran Colonial Academy Station 7 had never been so crowded. Students, teachers, and staff filled every available space in the lobby, spilling out into the adjoining corridors. They stood in absolute silence, their eyes fixed on the sealed doors of the intensive care unit. Behind those doors, Kiranel fought for her life. 3 days had passed since the Devourer attack. The station's emergency repair crews had worked around the clock to restore critical systems, but the scars of battle remained visible everywhere. Scorched bulkheads, collapsed corridors, memorial plaques already being erected for the 37 people who hadn't survived. 37 dead. But it would have been thousands without her. Principal Robert Mitchell stood before the assembled crowd, his usually pristine uniform rumpled and stained. He'd been coordinating rescue efforts for 72 hours straight and looked every minute of it. Vice Principal Lisa Harper stood beside him, her eyes red from crying. "I'm sure you're all wondering why I called this assembly," Mitchell began, his voice hoarse but steady. "Especially here now when we should be focused on rebuilding." He gestured to the intensive care unit doors. 3 days ago, while most of us were paralyzed with fear, one student that many of you tormented, excluded, and called Scum, saved every life on this station. The silence deepened. Students who'd laughed at Kiranel in the cafeteria couldn't meet Mitchell's eyes. "The recordings from the attack have been analyzed by Colonial Defense," Mitchell continued. "They show everything. They show that Kiranel detected the Devourer threat weeks before the attack. They show that she tried to warn us, tried multiple times, and was dismissed. They show that she spent those weeks building a weapon from scraps and salvaged parts, preparing for a threat she prayed would never come." He activated a wall display showing footage from the engineering bay cameras. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Kiranel's 4 arms worked across the harmonic disruptor's controls, her body already breaking apart from radiation exposure, her movements never slowing even as her carapace cracked and bled. "She knew what it would cost her," Mitchell said quietly. "The radiation levels were fatal. She knew, and she did it anyway. While you," his voice hardened, "while you called her scum, she was preparing to defend you. While you excluded her from your tables, she was building the weapon that would save your lives. While you treated her as less than human, she showed more humanity than any of us." Emma Collins stood up from where she'd been sitting with Brett, Jake, Ashley, and Tyler. Her voice shook as she spoke. "We helped her at the end. She showed us what to do. And that," Lisa Harper said, stepping forward, "is exactly who Kiranel is. Even after everything you all did to her when she needed help, she accepted it. She didn't hold grudges. She didn't seek revenge. She just fought to save everyone." Tyler Morrison rose to his feet, tears streaming down his face openly now. For 3 days he'd been standing vigil outside the medical wing, refusing to leave, barely eating. The guilt was written across every feature. "I was the worst to her," he said, his voice breaking. "I called her scum. I made fun of her. I made her life hell because I was angry about what happened to my uncle in the Veldari War, and I took it out on her. And she saved me anyway. She saved all of us anyway." He looked around at his classmates, many of whom had participated in the harassment. "We don't deserve what she did for us. But we can honor it. We can be better. We have to be better." The intensive care unit doors opened. Dr. Patricia Wells emerged, still wearing her surgical gear, her face exhausted but bearing a small smile. "She's stable," Dr. Wells announced. The lobby erupted in cheers and tears of relief. Tyler's knees buckled and Ashley caught him, both of them crying. Lisa Harper gripped Mitchell's shoulder, her own tears flowing freely. "It was close," Dr. Wells continued once the noise died down. "The radiation damage was extensive. Her carapace was shattered in 14 places, 2 of her hearts were failing, and her cellular structure was breaking down. But Veldari physiology is remarkably resilient. With the specialized treatments we've been administering, treatments she had the foresight to include in her personal medical file when she enrolled, she's going to survive." "When can we see her?" Tyler asked. "Not yet. She needs rest. But soon." Dr. Wells smiled. "Though I should warn you, she's already been asking about her homework. Apparently, she's worried about falling behind in advanced quantum mechanics." Laughter rippled through the crowd, the kind of laughter that comes after tears, full of relief and affection. Over the following weeks, the station slowly returned to normal operations. The Colony Defense Force established a permanent patrol around the system, implementing early warning systems based on Kirinel's scanner designs. The Federation Science Council launched a full investigation into the Devourer threat, realizing that humanity had been ignorant of dangers the older species had known about for millennia. And Terran Colonial Academy underwent a profound transformation. Tyler organized a petition signed by every student, formally apologizing to Kirinel and requesting her forgiveness. Emma started a cultural exchange program, bringing in resources about Veldari history, art, and customs. Brett and Ashley repainted Kirinel's quarters themselves, covering the walls with scenes from her homeworld based on descriptions she'd shared. Jake, despite his injured shoulder, worked with the engineering department to create a memorial in Engineering Bay 7, a plaque describing how one student's courage had saved them all. 4 weeks after the attack, Kirinel was finally cleared to leave the medical wing. She stepped into the corridor slowly, her movements still careful as her carapace continued to heal. The new growth was slightly darker than her original violet coloring, creating intricate patterns across her body, scars that told a story of sacrifice. The corridor wasn't empty. It was lined with students. Every single student in the academy stood there, shoulder to shoulder, filling the hallway in both directions. As Kirinel emerged, they began to applaud. The sound was deafening, echoing off the metal walls. Students who'd once mocked her now clapped until their hands hurt. Teachers who'd dismissed her warnings stood with tears in their eyes. Even Principal Mitchell was there, applauding with the rest. Kirinel's antennae lifted in surprise, then trembled with emotion. Her compound eyes glistened with what might have been tears. She'd never told anyone if Veldari could cry. Tyler stepped forward from the crowd, his hands clasped nervously. "We wanted to give you a proper welcome back," he said. "The welcome you should have gotten when you first arrived." He gestured toward the cafeteria. "And we were hoping you might join us for lunch?" Kirinel clicked her mandibles, the sound her people made when experiencing deep joy. Her translator rendered it as gentle laughter. "I would like that very much." They walked to the cafeteria together, Tyler on one side, Emma on the other, and a crowd of students following behind. When they entered, Kirinel saw that every table had been rearranged into one massive circle, with no head, no hierarchy, just equals sharing a meal. And at what had once been Tyler's table, the table where he'd first told her she couldn't sit, there was a chair designed specifically for her physiology. 4 armrests instead of 2. A backrest that accommodated her carapace. A small plaque on the seat that read, "Reserved for our hero." "Please," Tyler said, his voice thick with emotion. "We'd be honored." Kirinel sat, and the entire cafeteria sat with her. For the first time since arriving at Terran Colonial Academy, she wasn't eating alone. The months that followed brought more changes. Kirinel became something of a celebrity, not just on the station but across human space. The Federation Council awarded her the Star of Valor, the highest civilian honor, making her the first non-human recipient in history. Her parents traveled from the Veldari homeworld to attend the ceremony, and the reunion between mother, father, and daughter was broadcast across 100 worlds. But the greatest honor came from somewhere unexpected. The Veldari Council of Elders, the governing body of her people, sent an official delegation to the academy. They came to honor Kirinel not just for saving human lives, but for proving that the peace between their species could be real, that the wounds of the past could heal. "You have shown both our peoples what we can become," the eldest counselor said, her antennae white with age. "You have built a bridge across our shared pain." This is a greater victory than any battle. Graduation came in the spring. Kiranel stood at the podium as valedictorian, her newly healed carapace gleaming in the auditorium lights. She wore the modified academy uniform that had been designed specifically for her, and around her neck hung the Star of Valor. She looked out at her classmates, at Tyler, who'd become one of her closest friends, at Emma, who now spent hours learning Veldari language and customs, at Brett, Ashley and Jake, who'd fought beside her when it mattered most, at Lisa Harper, who'd never stopped believing in her, at Principal Mitchell, who'd learned to listen. When I first came to this academy, Kiranel began, her voice steady and clear, I came with hope and fear in equal measure. Hope that humans and Veldari could learn to see each other as equals. Fear that the wounds of the past were too deep to ever truly heal. She paused, her compound eyes sweeping across the audience. In those first weeks, my fear seemed justified. I was alone, excluded, treated as something less than a person. But then came the moment when we all faced something greater than our prejudices, greater than our pain. And in that moment, I learned something important. Her antennae lifted. Fear and hatred are easy. They require no courage, no effort, no growth. But understanding, real understanding, requires us to look past what makes us different and see what makes us the same. It requires us to choose compassion even when we've been given reasons to choose bitterness. She looked directly at Tyler, who smiled through tears. Some of you hurt me. Some of you made me question whether coming here was a mistake. But when the moment came, you chose to be better. You chose to fight beside me, to trust me, to see me. And that choice, that beautiful, difficult choice, is what saved us all. The auditorium was silent except for the sound of quiet crying. We are different, humans and Veldari, Kiranel continued. We look different, we think differently, we come from different worlds with different histories. But we share something more important than our differences. We share the ability to choose kindness over cruelty, unity over division, hope over despair. She held up her diploma, specially designed with clasps for her 4 hands. I graduate today not just as the Academy's first Veldari student, but as proof that our species can build a future together. A future where no one eats alone. Where everyone belongs. Where our differences make us stronger instead of tearing us apart. The applause started slowly, then built like a wave. Students rose to their feet, then teachers, then parents and guests. Within moments, the entire auditorium was standing, the ovation thunderous and heartfelt. After the ceremony, there was a reception in the cafeteria. The room had been decorated with symbols from both human and Veldari cultures, banners bearing the intertwined emblems of both species. At the center was a new installation, a permanent memorial featuring the names of those lost in the Devourer attack, and above it, a hollow sculpture of the harmonic disruptor with a simple inscription. Built by one saved us all. May we remember that our greatest strength lies not in our weapons, but in our willingness to stand together. Kiranel stood before it with Tyler, both of them gazing up at the flickering light. I accepted a commission, Kiranel said quietly. The Human Veldari Alliance Defense Force. They want me to help design early warning systems against the Devourers, train mixed species units. I know, Tyler said. I accepted one too. Same unit. He grinned at her surprised look. You didn't think we'd let you go off and save the galaxy without us, did you? Emma, Brett, Ashley, Jake, we all signed up. Someone needs to watch your back. Kiranel's mandibles clicked with laughter and affection. You do realize that Veldari don't actually need people to watch their backs? We have 360-degree vision. Then we'll watch your fronts. Or your sides. Or we'll just stand around looking heroic while you do all the work. Tyler's expression grew serious. I'm not letting you face the universe alone again, Kiranel. None of us are. You're stuck with us now. She looked around the cafeteria, at the students who'd once shunned her now laughing and celebrating together, at teachers and parents and Veldari delegates all sharing the same space, the same hope. At the small table in the corner where she'd once sat alone, now always occupied by mixed groups of human and Veldari students from the new exchange programs. 6 months ago she'd been an outsider, a target, someone barely tolerated. Now she was a hero, a friend, a symbol of what their species could accomplish together. Stuck with you, she repeated, her translator adding warmth to the words. I can think of worse fates. Years later, historians would point to the Devourer attack on Terran Colonial Academy Station 7 as the turning point in human Veldari relations. The moment when two species stopped seeing each other as former enemies and started seeing each other as allies, partners, friends. They would study the tactical brilliance of the harmonic disruptor, the courage of the students who fought, the systematic failures that nearly led to disaster. But they would also study something else, the recordings from the cafeteria that first day, when a young Veldari girl approached a table and was told she couldn't sit there. When she was called scum and rejected by the very people she would one day save. In military academies across human space, that recording became required viewing. Not for its tactical lessons but for its moral ones. This is why we fight, instructors would tell their cadets. Not just to defend against enemies from outside, but to defend against the enemy within, the prejudice, the fear, the small cruelties that blind us to the value in those who are different from us. And in every cafeteria of every academy in the Human Veldari Alliance, a small plaque was installed above the entrance. All are welcome here. Below it, in smaller text, in memory of those who learned this truth too late, and in honor of the one who taught it to us all. Kiranel would go on to become one of the Alliance's most decorated officers, her tactical innovations saving countless lives across a dozen worlds. Tyler, Emma, Brett, Ashley and Jake would serve with distinction at her side, their names forever linked in the history books. But none of them ever forgot where it started. In a cafeteria. At a table. With 5 words that should never have been spoken. And the choice, the beautiful, difficult choice, to be better than those words. To see beyond the surface. To choose understanding over fear. To save each other no matter the cost. Because in the end, that's what being human, or Veldari or any sentient being, truly meant. Not the ability to hate, but the courage to love despite everything.